We have made it to the week of Super Bowl 56 going down in Los Angeles. We get the Rams and Bengals battling it out. Our entire crew will be in LA all week, getting us ready for Super Bowl Sunday. Also, the latest news around the NFL, because there's a lot of that as well. Let's send it out to Sherry Burris, Jonathan Jones, and Brady Quinn.
All right, thanks, Amanda. And welcome into our home this week in beautiful Los Angeles. This is a nice setup we have as we get set for Super Bowl, joined by senior NFL writer Jonathan Jones and former NFL quarterback and analyst Brady Quinn. Guys, 30 other teams hope to find themselves in this position, getting ready for a Super Bowl like the Bengals and Rams, and a lot of teams putting that hopes in the hands of new head coaching. A lot of hirings to get to. First off, 49ers offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel taking over in Miami. Brady, I want your opinion. What does that hiring do for Tua Tagovailoa?
Well, hopefully it takes a lot of pressure off of his shoulders, because Mike McDaniel's best known for being a run game coordinator, OC there with the San Francisco 49ers. And so if they can get some of the running game going, at least more consistently in Miami, hopefully it means Tua doesn't have to do quite as much. I also think it might mean an even more expanded role for Jalen Waddle. He might move into that Deebo Samuel role where you look at how the 49ers utilized him too. But this to me is a vote of confidence, at least from ownership, Chris Greer, of what they think of Tua Tagovailoa, or at least giving him a shot to see what they can make him into, in my opinion, JJ.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. They spent the number 5 overall pick on him just a couple of years ago, and so they're going to see that investment through. I think part of that is the reason that Brian Flores is no longer there and Chris Greer stayed, right? Whenever you make that sort of split, sometimes you throw the baby out with the bathwater. They decided to keep Chris Greer, the guy who has built that team, and when you look at what they got in the draft last year as well, right? They had Jalen Phillips, they had Javon Holland, they got Jalen Waddle. You're right. I think we're going to see a far more horizontal passing game with the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel. They're going to build off of the run. The pass will be an extension of the run. This is obviously a huge thing for Tua moving forward.
Doug Peterson finding a new home in Jacksonville this week. This is going to be Trevor Lawrence's third head coach and just starting his second season in the NFL. And when Doug Peterson was introduced, Trevor said what he liked most is that Peterson has been in his shoes, can see a similar lens. How can Doug Peterson get Trevor Lawrence to play the way that everyone projected him to be?
I think the biggest thing is perspective is everything. And when you've got a coach who's been there, done that as a player, and obviously been successful too as a head coach, and helping to bring along, obviously, the situation there in Philly ended up being Nick Foles, but Carson Wentz, who had a phenomenal year that year too as a young quarterback, it gives you confidence that he can bring out the best in you. The biggest thing moving forward too is, going back to the point of perspective, he understands the difficulties firsthand that Trevor Lawrence has been going through. Lack of protection, lack of playmaking, building on the outside. And now he can create an offense around him and hopefully build around him to be able to help him and not make him have to make the best throw every single time he drops back the pass that he's ever made in his life. That's what it feels like. It feels like everything was a struggle for the Jacksonville Jaguars this past year. I think Doug Peterson was going to help him take some of that pressure off his shoulders and see things from the quarterback perspective moving forward, and hopefully, again, give him a little bit better protection. I mean, he was getting beat up week in and week out.
Yeah, he was. And also, they're going to get some guys back, right? They're going to get Shark back. They're going to get Travis Etienne. So you're going to get some help on the field, literally, and then you're going to get some help from your game caller, from your play caller in Doug Peterson. The other thing, though, when you talk about the deficiencies of the Jacksonville Jaguars this past year and before that, you know, a lot of it falls on the scouting department. Well, Shad Khan, the owner, is looking to beef up that scouting department and that personnel office. And I'd reported last week Rick Spielman is a guy that they're looking to bring in. How that organizational hierarchy is ultimately going to work out is something that has to be determined. But Shad Khan has filed with the NFL papers to create an EVP position. Is that going to be EVP of football ops, almost like Tom Coughlin was there, where it'll be Rick Spielman it'll be Shad Khan, then Rick Spielman, and then Trent Baalke. Those things have to be worked out.
I sure hope so, for the sake of Trevor Lawrence. Otherwise, this could be another ugly divorce. We saw that year after year in San Francisco with Trent Baalke, and now he's once again a part of the same conversation in Jacksonville.
Right, one coaching vacancy that is still open. We have the Houston Texans. JJ, what are you hearing as they're narrowing down their search?
Well, it's very likely going to be Lovie Smith. And you want to just go ahead and say, put it in Sharpie, it's going to be Lovie Smith. Well, we're talking about the Houston Texans. And so I don't want to say anything is certain just yet. But listen, the Houston Texans had very much eyed Josh McCown as being their next head coach. For whatever reason or reasons, and a number of folks that I talked to around the league believe that Brian Flores' lawsuit had something to do with the perception of what they would have to be dealing with if they ultimately made Josh McCown, who's never coached a day in the professional or the collegiate levels, as their head coach. And so now they turn to Lovie Smith, who is an internal candidate.
Right.
This is a month after the season's ended. And why'd you fire David Culley in the first place? And I also, just one last thing. I know that the Houston Texans have been putting out there that Brian Flores was a candidate and a real serious finalist. I've always found that very difficult to believe, Brady.
Well, and going back to the Culley comment, I mean, Nick Caserio was hired at the beginning of January 2021. Culley was hired at the end of the month. I mean, you would have figured if you had any philosophical differences, you would have figured that out over the course of the vetting interview process. So again, firing a guy only to elevate a guy from within, it doesn't really make much sense. I wouldn't be shocked, though, going back to Lovie Smith, if he is indeed the head coach, that there isn't a spot for Josh McCown somewhere on that staff. I think that would be good for Davis Mills going into his second year as the quarterback, if he is indeed the quarterback. If they can't convince Deshaun Watson to come back, which seems incredibly unlikely at this point, or don't go some other route of adding a quarterback. Either way, I wouldn't be shocked if Josh McCown wasn't on that staff and he doesn't get the ball rolling with building up some more credibility being a coach in the NFL.
And I'll just say on that, it may be Josh McCown as quarterback's coach. It may be Pep Hamilton being retained as offensive coordinator.
Well, for the first time in 15 years, the New Orleans Saints looking for a head coach. You kind of mentioned the Texans have some roster issues they need to iron out. Same goes for the Saints. But JJ, what are we hearing about who they're looking for?
Right now, I think we have to believe that the leading candidate is Dennis Allen, defensive coordinator there. Eric Bieniemy had a very long interview, I believe 7 hours, that he spoke with the New Orleans Saints. So obviously he's always going to be in the mix like he's been for what appears to be a quarter of the jobs around the NFL, but never gets to be the bride, always the bridesmaid, right? And so it appears right now, if you had to pick a favorite, the leading candidate would be Dennis Allen. He was name-checked by Sean Payton at his retirement press conference. Retirement, right? For a season until we see him with the Dallas Cowboys next year, right? But it looks like it'll be Dennis Allen, and yes, they're going to have some cap issues, no doubt. They're going to restructure 8 to 12 guys. They're going to get under the cap. Are they going to be comfortably under the cap to go out and get the free agents that they want to? No, but there's a lot of people talking about, they're in cap hell. They're going to get that figured out.
I think the interesting thing is going to be if it is indeed Dennis Allen. He's been there. He obviously has seen Taysom Hill firsthand, not only as a starter but also a backup, right? Servicing the scout team. How do they view him? How do they view some of the other quarterbacks on the roster? That's one of the biggest questions that they ultimately need to answer this offseason, aside from their head coach. And I know they talked about Eric Bieniemy, who's obviously from Louisiana, potentially being a candidate. This would be a great spot for him. A little surprised by the fact that hasn't got a little bit more run at this point, or he hasn't gotten a shot or opportunity. A
lot of moving parts to keep our eyes on. We appreciate the time, Jonathan Jones, Brady Quinn there on the coaching carousel that continues to go around. And if you want more in-depth analysis, make sure you catch Inside the NFL. James Brown and the guys have you covered every game, every week, with trademark highlights from NFL films, including all the sound and wires, special in-depth features, and spirited debate on the game's hottest topics. Don't miss an episode on Paramount Plus.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.